This episode of the What's Happening Delco podcast features Matt Serra and Kenwood Original. It was recorded on our sister podcast, Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guests. He's Matt Serra. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Rich. Really, really excited to be on.
I love talking beer, and today we get to talk light beer. And we met John at Pints in the Square, which is a beer festival in the Newtown Square, Broomall area. And we tried your beer, and I'm like, I can't believe this is a light beer. Right. So, Matt, how did Serra Brewing and Kenwood get started?
Yeah, so thanks for the words about, you can't believe it's a light beer, because that's kind of the point of Kenwood, right? We want everyone to know that there is a better light beer option out there. Because, at the end of the day, having light beer around, we think is something that most drinkers still do, because there's so many great beers out there. But a light beer under 4.5% that you can have more than a few of for any different occasion is still super important and super relevant in the market. I came up with Kenwood and the whole premise of this as I was working for Victory Brewing. Everyone is familiar with Victory. They make some of the best beers in the world. But as you kind of work through the industry and you go to so many bars and beer stores and you really dive into the industry every single day, I felt that there was a void for a light beer option that I loved to drink that was brewed in Philadelphia. The grand premise of this all was that St. Louis has Budweiser, Milwaukee has Miller. We wanted Philadelphia to have its own light beer, but we wanted it to be, the best version of a light beer that we could make. So with that, we got a couple of partners. We found a good recipe, and we found some super, super good brewers that we trusted with it, and we were off and running.
So, there's a lot there to unpack. Now, at some point, I think you recognize beer history and brewing history. Where does Matt come into that? Like, your love of beer or your love of brewing? You talked about working with Victory. Talk about your progression through the brewing industry a little bit.
Yeah. So my real, my most skills lie within sales and marketing. So out of college or in college, I worked for some wholesalers, Anheuser-Busch wholesalers, and that was merchandising and, driving big Bud Light trucks around and hanging signs at the biggest beer distributors all over Pennsylvania. And then I moved into sales with some other wholesalers, and then I worked for Anheuser-Busch in sales and marketing. Look, Anheuser-Busch, I know people don't like a lot of their beers and sometimes what they do, but they're the masters of this beer industry that everyone's in, right? So I learned a lot working for Anheuser-Busch, and then with Victory, the same thing. With Victory, it was cool because I would hang out with Bill Kovaleski, the founder, and God, talk about learning a lot about beer. That guy just an encyclopedia of beer knowledge. So it was cool working with Victory because you learned a lot, like hands-on. In the brewery, whenever we needed to be, touring people. And being that we were local, you would take bars and restaurants on tours of the brewery, once a month or whatever. So when you're, on brewery tours, you learn a lot because you're doing it more and more. I've homebrewed in the past, very little. I liked it, but I don't have the patience that some people do to do that. So I homebrewed. I trained for the Cicerone and with Anheuser-Busch with Master Cicerones. So my beer knowledge is above average, but I'm never going to say that I know as much as a guy that brews our beer or someone that's been brewing beer for 20 years. They're in the brew house every day, and they know so much more about the process and the details of beer than I do. But again, I'm not just some schmo that has no idea what's going on with Kenwood.
It really sounds like a lot of what you spoke about in your experience. You have a super huge base in branding and marketing.
Yeah.
Take that from what you learned with Anheuser-Busch and Victory and how you've applied that to Kenwood and just the branding and marketing. I mean, the packaging and everything else as people get to know what you're all about.
Yeah. So we really focus on, as you said, our brand and our marketing, right? Because we leave the beer making to our head brewer who we can get to later, that we contract it all out to. But what we can focus on is the sales and marketing efforts that really are, 75% of this entire game. I mean, we all know that there's so many great beers out there that don't get the proper attention. I'm sure you've had beers that you're like, wow, no one knows about this and no one cares about it. And why is that? Probably because the sales and marketing efforts are lacking. So we really wanted to combine finding a guy that could brew beer better than anyone with our crew that could sell and market it just hell or high water and see where we could land. So branding and marketing are so important to us because if we can get the beer in as many people's hands as we can, we know that our brewer is taking care of it being the best version of itself. Now,
Kenwood Original. How'd you come up with the name?
Yeah. So the short answer is that it's the first street I grew up on in Drexel Hill in Delaware County. So Kenwood was my street that I spent the first 15 years of my life. A lot of great memories there, down the street from my elementary school. So Kenwood and their street signs on the emblem. So it's really kind of, everyone grew up on a street. Everyone has their street sign. Everyone has their corner. So there's a little bit of that to it. But also, listening to Sarah Blakely, she's the founder of Spanx. Super cool entrepreneur. Love.
I had no idea we'd be talking about Spanx on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. No one does, but that's why it's a podcast, because we can get to that. So Sarah Blakely, in her podcast, she says that hard K sounds are really memorable, right? You have like Kit Kat and like McDonald's, and that K is a really memorable sound and people can say it. So when I was looking through names, like how we wanted to really tie this in, that was kind of the deciding factor, hearing from her that if you have like a hard K, people will certainly remember it better than a name like, without any hard sounds to grasp onto.
That's fascinating. I mean, you can really hear the desire to create a brand with Kenwood.
Yeah.
Connect. I think the thing about this is, like, you talk about the street signs, you talk about the area where you grew up in Drexel Hill. There's a connection with the brand. You want to feel like you're opening up that neighborhood, corner brew, right? How does that resonate, do you think? I mean, right now, you're taking over the Philly community, right? You're the only light beer that I'm aware of that's, again, the idea is that you became laser focused on making a light beer when everybody, I think, is shooting for, all right, I'm going to do the IPAs, I'm going to do the hazies, I'm going to do the lagers, the pilsners. You shot right for a light beer and are branding that out.
Yeah.
How do you now take this from that local, Philadelphia area and grow it to a national brand?
Yeah, so there's some of the, I don't want to say challenges because we haven't attacked them yet, but that's what we're looking forward to in the next year or two, right? How do we make sure we don't become too hyper-focused on Philadelphia, but we make it so that New Jersey, Delaware, Chicago, and Florida all understand the branding behind it. And I think a lot of it does come back to like that hominess of it, right? Because these street signs on our logo can be any two streets in the country, in the world, really, right? So if we can get every market to understand that, hey, we know you drink a lot of light beer, but here's one that's a little bit better. And it comes from a place where you can make it your own, right? You brand this as your local light beer. You brand this as your favorite light beer. It's really about getting it into consumers' hands and then telling the story of where we came from. Where, as you said, a lot of breweries will attack the market with 5 or 6 different beers and different SKUs, but not really have a story or a brand message behind it. And those beers can be amazing, but they'll fall flat because the marketing and sales efforts aren't congruent with what they're doing. So if we go to a market, we want to make sure that the beer is up to par and that we can send the same message that we sent to Philadelphia, that, hey, we're going to come attack you with the best light beer you have. But also, you know, there's going to be a personality and real people behind this thing.
Take us into the R&D department, the discovery department, as to where you met with your head brewer and you worked through that flavor profile that this is exactly, you knew where you were taking this light beer.
Yeah. So we'll go back to where we started with this thing. A good friend of mine who now is one of the owners and founders of Wrong Crowd Brewing in Westchester. His name is Dan Shaw. He's a great brewer. He had a little spot in Bryn Mawr, and I asked him if he could brew this recipe that I found, that I came up with, read about for Kenwood. And with no hesitation, he brewed the first batch of Kenwood, and we loved it. And the premise of that was to have the light beer profile, which includes rice. So Kenwood does have rice, but use, higher quality hops, yeasts, and so on and so forth. So Dan brewed our first keg, and we loved it because it had that little light beer familiarity with the rice to it. And it was light and it was drinkable, but it was a notch better than any other light lager we've seen out there. So from there, we took it to Doylestown Brewing Company, where we brewed for about 5 months with Joe Modestine. He helped us greatly. We started putting beer into cans. We had kegs. We were brewing 7-barrel batches at a time. And it was cool. We were just, making sure that we could get it to the market and it would sell, and it was selling. So Joe dialed in a little bit more, and he got us 5 or 6 batches in a row that were killer, and we really, really liked. So then to start 2020, I reached out to Brian O'Reilly, who brews at Mainstay. But he brewed at Sly Fox for 20 years, and he's truly one of the best lager brewers in, I say the country, but certainly Pennsylvania. So it really was kind of like hey, I know this guy. Could you brew this for us? And Brian, he took us on, and I don't know if he thought we were crazy. Like, he was like, you're just going to brew one beer with me. But we were like, yeah, like that's all we want to do. We want to brew one beer that we like and we want to sell. So since we got to Mainstay in 2020, he's dialed it in to be like just, every time I drink a pint at the bar, like on draft, I'm like, wow, he's got this beer to a point that is so good. It's always fresh. It's amazing what a great brewer can turn just what seems like a simple recipe.
What's exciting for me, and I get these little hairs that stand up on the back of my neck, is to hear you talk about the Philadelphia regional brewing scene and all the people that come together to help you. Yeah. And Dan over at Wrong Crowd, they're great. They make some significant, phenomenal beers.
Amazing beers,
But the journey to Doylestown and Mainstay, when you consider, again, I think there's a connection to history from a lot of what you do, and you consider the connection to history in Philadelphia. And this goes back, we're going back to the 1800s and the growth of the brewing industry in Philadelphia. This is that craft way of taking that all together, everybody coming together to develop and make everybody better.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so cool still. And again, I'm not like a brewer. I never had a brewery, but just from working in well-respected breweries and having a sales background, I could get people like Dan to talk to me, and then Joe to talk to me, and eventually Brian at Mainstay. They'd all have the conversation because, again, although I can't go brew 60 barrels of beer like Brian does for us, he knows that I know this guy who knows this guy who can vouch for Matt being a good guy, and they can sit down and have a conversation with me. And yes, it also helps that I can go talk about which hops we're going to use, how our yeast strain is, how big of barrels we want to do. That all is important, but each level that we've gone, we couldn't have done it without having good friends and good people in this industry.
What's it like for you when you walk into a bar or a beer store and you see your label and your product on the shelves or on the tap?
It's the best. Yesterday I was at a bar in Center City, a new spot that we love, and they're selling a lot of Kenwood for us, called Paulie G's. I was there just catching up with one of the managers, and there's 2 Padres fans at the bar. I'm like, God damn it, is this going to be a Padres bar today? Like, this isn't what we want. But
come on, we're so inclusive here. Come on.
Yeah. I was like, God damn, well, whatever. But they're both drinking Kenwood. I'm like, wow, that's amazing that these people are drinking Kenwood on a Sunday at like 12 o'clock. They're headed down to the game. If they're from San Diego and now they're drinking Kenwood, that's amazing. So after that, I walk outside and there's a Kenwood like littered on the ground next to the bar, which part of my brain, I'm like, this is awesome. Someone was drinking a Kenwood and just like crush it. The other part of me made me go pick it up and take it in my truck so I could dispose of it. But like those little things, when you see Kenwood like in people's hands or in a trash can or anything, it's amazing because it's obviously easy for us and our friends to love this beer. But when there's people that don't know us from Adam and they're drinking 5 at the bar and then they leave with 1, it's the coolest thing in the world. It never, ever gets old.
You talk about, there's so many light beers that people have a choice of purchasing or consuming. Yeah. How do you develop that, customer, that brand follower, that this is my go-to? What do you think is the mindset there to say, hey, I know there's a sea of choices out there. This is the one, try it. Because when, it's a matter of getting it on the lips, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Once you get it on somebody's palate, you can really create that, Kenwood drinker for life. Yeah. But how do you get to that point where somebody's willing to say, all right, I see that light beer, that one's on tap, that one's, I can get that in a can or bottle. How do you see that creation of getting through all that, haze?
Yeah, I know that's the $1 million question, right? It's like why the big guys are so successful is because they tell these stories and get to these customers better than anyone. I think for us though, it's about getting personable and showing our personality and connecting to what we see as the light beer consumer. I think the light beer consumer has changed in the past 20 years. It's not just your 30-pack guy who is drinking 30 a week and buying it once a week on their couch. I think the light beer consumer has changed a little bit to the craft beer guy that also needs a light beer in their fridge, where they'll drink a couple hazy IPAs at the bar, but then they need to switch to something that they know is good, but it costs $4 less and has 4% less ABV. So we try to understand where our consumer is drinking and what they're drinking, right? Because it's to be the only thing someone drinks right now, it's becoming harder and harder. But if we can be the only light beer you drink, that's where we want to land. So you can look at what people drink besides Kenwood, where people drink, and even how with draft versus cans. So when you kind of put all of these things together, you can see the best place to attack. Is the best place for us to attack a 19.2 ounce can in a dive bar in Northeast Philly? Maybe not. But is it that $4 draft special at a craft spot in South Philly? Probably. So as you go and as you grow, you learn more about your consumers and you learn more about your retailers, and you see what moves and really what moves the needle as you sell more beer, each month.
I think about what you're sharing there, and I think about how we connect. Let's face it. You're going to hang out with your crew, right?
Yeah.
You're going to hang out. You got an event coming up, and you say, look, this is a good beer. This is a good idea. If I bring this light beer, but I think there's this connection to say, if you show up with with some cans, or the Kenny pack, as you call it, right?
Yeah.
There's a reflection on the drinker as to say, how does this, how do people look at me or consider me with what I'm bringing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's crazy,
especially in the craft industry.
Yeah, and it's funny because we have the kings of light beer, right? And you can show up anywhere with a Bud Light 30 pack, and everyone will know what that is. So for us, it's about making Kenwood cooler. Like if someone shows up with Kenwood, we want everyone at that party, like you're saying, to say, "Oh, that guy, he must be on social media. He must be in tune with the Philadelphia market. He must know about Kenwood like I do." That's cool. Not, it starts a conversation. No one's ever going to start a conversation over Bud Light 30 pack being brought to a party. And again, that's okay. If we're ever in that space where no one's starting a conversation on Kenwood, we'll be thrilled. But for now, it's about people connecting, saying, "Oh, I follow Kenwood on Twitter. Did you see their giveaway they did?" And the guy, that brought it also follows us on Twitter, or he had it at his favorite bar. And he's like, "I always drink it at Paulie G's. You should drink it there." So we're still in that super young stage where the conversation around it can still be cool, because we're still we're known so much less than so many beers, that keeping it to that kind of cool new light beer is still a space we want to be in.
Well, let's face it, the Phillies just took care of the Padres and are now going to the World Series. But the reality of it is right now, based on our conversation, their celebration really wasn't cool, because I probably guess they didn't have Kenwood in the locker room.
Not yet.
Yeah. That's something now they can strive for the World Series championship. So, watching Bryce Harper crack open a Kenwood, and hopefully he consumes it and enjoys it before he pours it over somebody's head, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And that's, the ultimate goal is to be in that locker room one day. And it's just amazing to see how big brands can get, where that beer bottle is on that TV last night and everyone knows what beer that is. It's amazing.
Well, they have their work cut out for them in their number one playing and achieving, and their selection of beer. Well, I waited this long, and like I said, we enjoyed this at Pints in the Square, and there were over the course of the day there were 20 breweries, and you're pouring, so that's 40 selections or more.
It's a lot,
and this was refreshing to me. This was flavorful, and I'm the first thing I said to John was, "How come I've never heard of this before?" So that's where you introduce people at those beer festivals and in a lot of other ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's super important, because again, we're not doing anything new. We're just bringing a new kind of Philadelphia based twist to the biggest category in beer.
The color on this, it's fun because it pours like almost like a wheat beer on the color.
Right.
But it comes out as more of a Pilsner style.
Yeah.
You get that wheat, that more deep amber rich wheat. You don't get the red tones, but you get more of the yellowish tones.
Yeah.
Nice. You can't see this on the podcast while you're driving. But I poured this well. It comes up with a nice frothy head, which now gives me that anticipation that I'm going to have a creamy mouthfeel. Talk about, you mentioned how Dan at Wrong Crowd helped you, create that recipe, that flavor profile, but talk about maybe some of the ideas for where you were coming from, or they were coming from, that they were shooting for that flavor.
So the number one flavor profile that we wanted to attack was that profile that we get with the rice. So most craft breweries, and they don't use rice because what it does to the beer. But for us to have that familiarity with the light beers and adding that crispness was super important. So along with that, we use Columbus hops that gives it that bite at the end. So it's not just a crisp beer that has nothing to it. With the hops, you have the bite on the back end. So you kind of have a full beer from first sip until it goes down your throat. And, adding those two things is important to us because it gives you the light beer taste, but it gives you the flavor of a better light beer, as we say.
There's a lot of things that I experience, and I appreciate you taking me through that, flavor journey that you were looking to create. There's certainly, you get the spiciness, and I think coriander, or I think more baking notes in the flavor, some citrus as you're drinking it. And you really describe that hop experience, that finish that still lingers on the palate. Right. And I would say when, the idea of a light beer, what do people say? There's no flavor. I want something with flavor. And this epitomizes flavor where you stop and say, I can't believe this is a light beer.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the only pushback that we'll get is that people will say, well, it's not like 96 calories or 99 calories light. And I say, yeah, that's completely fair. Right. It's never going to be the Corona Light, Michelob Ultra calorie count where you can, you can drink a beer under 100 calories, but Kenwood's 127 calories. So the only beers that are lighter are the ones I just described: Bud Light, Miller Lite, Michelob Ultra, Corona Light. Every other beer that you see in the market is either equal to, like a Budweiser or a Yuengling, or has more calories than Kenwood. So when we say light beer, we mean that it's lighter than about 98% of the market, and that's a good place to be. Maybe one day we'll bring a beer out that's less than 100 calories, but sacrificing the flavor is the last thing we want to do, right? And when I drink, I haven't done it in a long time, but when I drank the beers that were under 100 calories, to me there was just nothing to them, and I didn't like to drink them.
Let's face it, you're not making a seltzer, right?
No,
you're not making a beer seltzer.
We say that all the time too. Like when we drink beer, you're going to have some calories in your stomach. Just prepare for it. And we're not going to give you a 230 calorie beer. We're going to give you a light ABV and light calorie beer.
But you're also not giving me an 8, 9, 10, 14 ABV beer. And now I can drink a number of these and enjoy that activity. I mean, you talk about, hey, you're going, out golfing with your buddies, or, there's that backyard party. There's those things where you want to drink and enjoy the flavor of beer, but you want to have, the full experience without feeling like, well, either A, I had a couple and now I feel full, or B, I had a couple and, now I have to wonder if I can drive home.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that's of the utmost importance to us that a lot of people tag us on social media when they're tailgating, and it's such a great tailgate beer because you're in that for the long haul typically. So if you have a beer that you can sip on pretty much all day, it makes us feel good. That was the point of it, right? To make this beer that you could drink 15 of across a weekend or whatever.
Talk about where you're looking. We talked about national dominance or world dominance a little bit.
World dominance. Yeah,
but talk about the plan. Talk about the next couple of years and the focus and goal of Kenwood, of Serra Beer Company. Is there another SKU that you're thinking about doing? Talk about some of that.
Yeah. So right now we offer 12-ounce cans in a 6-pack or a 15-pack, and then we offer draft beer as well. Coming by the end of November, we'll have 16-ounce cans out into the market. So we like that just because, again, it's a light beer that we can hit a few avenues with that we're not hitting now. And 16-ounce cans, as everyone knows, are becoming increasingly popular. So if we can get an affordable 16-ounce can on the shelf and hopefully into some other avenues, then we should, we want to keep that around. Moving into next year, we want to bring out more Kenwood. I call them variants. right? So little offshoots of Kenwood. So when you think of what you can do with a light lager, the possibilities are endless, right? You could do a lime, you could do a lemon, you could do a raspberry, you could do a super light, you could do a super heavy, you could do a super dry, you could go anywhere with it. So we have some pretty strong ideas of what we're going to do in February and March. Nothing official yet, but we want to bring out at least 2 Kenwood variants that, can sit next to Kenwood on the shelf and are there for the same drinking occasions. So the Kenwood name will never have a beer that's a hazy IPA. Or a beer that you can only drink 1 or 2 of. That's not what Kenwood is. Kenwood's always going to be the fun beer that you can have a few of at a tailgate or at a party. Now for Serra Beer Company, which is the parent company above Kenwood, we will bring out more brands. Serra Beer will offshoot into pretty much anything. We want to dive into a wit beer. We want to dive into a hazy IPA, but they won't be Kenwood branded, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. So you have all these different flagships. Yeah. Again, that you connect with the brand. Here's what I can say. If I'm out and I can say to the bartender, or, I show up with something different, I'm associating myself, and you're not just going in. I think there's some value here, and I really appreciate what you're doing in terms of, I can associate with Kenwood now, and I can order that, and people are looking at me going, if you haven't heard about it, what's a Kenwood? Then I'm like, here, try this. Right. And again, it's really, to me, and what's important, it's also about what you're putting in the cans, what you're putting on draft. Full of flavor, you really get a feeling that you're having that beer experience versus, you know what, I want to order a beer because I want a little bit of beer flavor. This is a beer that can stand up against many things, and it's craft. Yeah, and you can enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's, I think at the end of the day, that's what's most important to us, is that even with these Kenwood variants, we're still playing into the Kenwood drinker. So the same guy or girl who sits at the bar looking for light, flavorful, affordable can do that with Kenwood lime or Kenwood lemon. So we're not changing the drinker at all. We're just giving them more options and trying to grow our drinker base of people that know the Kenwood brand. Now, if, when we brew a wit beer, is that consumer different? Probably. We look at an Allagash or Blue Moon, and they have a different consumer than Bud Light and even craft pilsners. So we'll have to attack a different consumer base, and we do that in a different way. But at the end of the day, as you mentioned, having what goes in that glass be enjoyable and be a high quality product is what's most important.
Matt, we've talked a lot about Kenwood and Serra Brewing, Serra Beer Company. Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't shared on the podcast that you want to have people know about what you're doing or what to expect down the road?
Besides following us on social media, and that's where we probably talk too much on social media. Twitter is where we're most active, which we love because we can connect to consumers the best on Twitter. And then obviously Instagram, Facebook are great. But following us on social media is cool because we get to keep up with what we're doing. We'll give away things. We have tons of merch that we love to sell. And then, hopefully if we do this again in a year, we have a location of our own coming into play. But right now it's still about brewing our beer via contract agreement at Mainstay and making sure that, he can continue to brew our beer at a super high level.
When I said this before, I asked about this before, but you're creating this local brand that's going to become a national brand. Does that? I mean, what does your family say when you have those conversations? I mean, Thanksgiving's coming, right?
Yeah, and they say shut up, Matt. All you do is talk about Kenwood. No, I'm just kidding. It's that's kind of the whole entire point of it is as even like today we're looking through merchandise sales, and 2 years ago when we started selling merch, it was like all of our little neighborhood, and we knew everyone that bought the merchandise. Now, like the merchandise, I don't know anyone that orders it. And it's like, that's the best, right? We're shipping merchandise wherever we need to, and you don't know these names, but it's these people that are supportive of the brand. and they're buying our merch. And merch is, buying a 15-pack or a 6-pack is the ultimate goal, but merch is really cool because they're digging into their pockets a little deeper, and they're putting like our brand on their chest or on their back. And that's like, to think that sometimes we'll see a guy in like a Kenwood sweatshirt just walking in a part of Philadelphia. It's super cool.
So it's almost like having your own gang colors.
yeah, and exactly. And not to wear like your Budweiser red around us. You better not wear that.
No, that would be a bad. You're just going to ship them off to San Diego with the Padres now.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's we try to stay really in tune with like our branding and our colors. So one day, hopefully, it's a recognizable color scheme. Further than just our local bars.
All right, Matt, you said you're from Delco. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you some Delco questions. Are you ready?
We're ready, as always.
All right, you're heading to the brewer, and you're checking out to see how the cans are coming together. Where are you going for a cheesesteak if you're a little hungry?
So where am I going for a cheesesteak? You know what? Since they've came onto the scene, Delco steaks, they've been so good, consistent, full. The rolls are awesome. So I'm probably going Delco steaks with the sharp provolone.
I'll tell you what, I can't imagine any other beer that's going to go really well with that steak sandwich.
Yeah,
so,
when they like were opening and they were getting started, we were at the same time. So we'd give them Kenwood a lot, and they would give it out to some customers, or their guys would drink it in the back. We did some cool stuff with them. So soft spot in my heart with those guys.
All right, so you did the cheesesteak, and now you're craving a pizza. Where are you heading for pizza?
Pico's. Bar none, Pico's and Upper Darby. It's still the best pizza you can get.
Tremendous. Now, all right, here's for you, because I wonder, how this is working on getting on the shelves. But, again, you're out there, you're introducing people to Kenwood, and you need a convenience store option. Are you stopping off at Royal Farms, or are you stopping off at Wawa?
The amount of times that I still go to Wawa during the week is mind-boggling. And it's like for gas or for gum or to use the restroom. But I can probably count the number of times on one hand that I've stepped foot into a Royal Farms. And that's like one day of Wawa is like 5 times. So it's still Wawa forever and always. It's just ingrained in us.
Now, if Wawa really wants to associate and raise the level of beer for the beer they're offering, they need to start stocking Kenwood on their shelves.
I know. It hurts my soul, like when I'll go into a Wawa and you see like national brands and I'm like, damn, like we should be on this shelf. But they have like 2 coolers, so I get it. But we have to get to that Wawa shelf set by the time this thing is done.
It's on the radar now. I guarantee it.
Yeah, good. Yeah. If nothing else, we drive by the headquarters all the time. So I'll just drop a case or 2 right at the front door, and they'll have to get it in their heads at that point.
You grew up in Delco, and what does Delco mean to you? How do you describe Delco to somebody?
Oh man. How do you describe Delco to somebody? I guess, like for me, a lot of Delco is, it's community by community, people knowing each other across Delaware County. So where you might not have grown up in a part of Delco, someone that knows someone from that part. So where there's however many towns there are, and you're super close with your town, as you get older and as you meet more people, that all of these towns just have so much in common and so many mutual connections that it's hard to find a town that you end up not having like 2 degrees of separation from.
You have somebody coming in from out of town and you want to provide or take them to enjoy that Delco experience. Where are you taking them, or where are you sending them?
Oh, God. Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, man. I mean, like, there's so many ways you could go with this. Is it like, do you go to like McDade Boulevard and hit like the first ever Wawa and like,
which isn't really the first ever Wawa anymore.
Right. And hit like a bar along McDade and then or hit 8 bars on McDade? Or do you go to like, like a Pinocchio's, like an establishment that's been in Delaware County that everyone kind of knows about. Being a beer guy, I've probably leaned towards like the Pinocchio's and then like exploring media a little bit. Keep everyone safe. And then, but I think there's so many ways you could go because each town kind of has their claim to fame, if you will.
I've enjoyed this conversation with you, and I'm curious, what motivates you? What gets you out of bed every day?
There's always going to be room to grow, right? Like Kenwood's, even if we're the best selling beer in the country in however many, 100, 200 years, 300 years, you're never going to have
some legacy, man. You having kids yet? Because you're pretty young.
Like you're never going to have every shelf and every bar handle and everything filled. So like when I'm at a bar and I'm at one of my favorite bars that we sell a lot of Kenwood, and I see someone drinking like a Bud Light or a Miller Lite, I'm like, damn, man, like I want to be one day the beer that is synonymous with that bar, no matter what, where there's no other light beer that people are drinking at that bar. And again, our goals are so lofty that they sound crazy, but that's where we want to be. And that's what gets me out of bed every single day.
That's awesome. I really enjoyed our time today. Thank you so much. I'm sure, Delco is very proud of one of their sons for, you're putting a street name on the beer community map, so that's huge. That's really huge.
Yeah. And if nothing else, if Delco isn't proud, I think Kenwood Road in Drexel Hills is proud.
Now you're going to have to like buy the whole street and then turn it into some historical park or something.
We'll just do like a big block party, like a Kenwood block party and give everyone free beer one day.
All right. It's on the calendar.
Perfect. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Matt.